Football fans, we're back. It's been like 3 months, 4 months. Naif and the All Black. But we're back and we're ready to talk about football. This is the Football v Football podcast, and this is the top 10 greatest pass rushers. NF, how you doing,
Hey
buddy?
now. Hey now. I had to bring back my catchphrase, man. It's been a long time.
Absolutely. I mean, you got absolute dog water. None of these guys we're going to talk about today are absolute dog water, but
Not at
maybe in
all.
some honorable mentions they will be. But it's good to see you, man. It's good to be back. And before we get started, we got a couple discount codes for you guys to help you save some money. First is on SeatGeek. You get $20 off when you use the code FOOTBALLVFOOTBAll. Now, NF here just went to an event that could have been used. SeatGeek, he went to
Wish I
a
had known.
comedy show. Isn't that right?
That is right, man. I just came out of the Dave Chappelle show. Wish I had known. We gotten some cheaper tickets.
There you
Should have
go.
told me earlier. Wow, we got the
Absolutely.
sponsors.
Lack of communication by me, I apologize, but
Any
don't
word
do
on the
it, Dave.
Play-Doh
Huh?
sponsors? Any word on the Play-Doh sports sponsors? Or
Plato,
still
we
working
haven't
on
heard
that?
from him, bro. Listen. Plato didn't step up to the plate, but SeatGeek stepped up to the plate. And like I said, you save $20 by the code FOOTBALLVFOOTBALL at checkout. Not only that, we got another sponsor, Huga House, and they make premium hats and T-shirts. You get 15% off. Use the code BALL at checkout. That's BALL at checkout. And you save on great hats, great shirts, and they got tote bags too. So now, if I know you're a hat guy, maybe if we continue to ramp this up, we get you some hats.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah,
Shout out to the
absolutely.
sponsors.
Shout out to the sponsors. All right, we're gonna jump into it now. The top 10 greatest pass rushers of all time. Well, maybe not of all time. What we do here is we go modern era. So they had to, start playing by 1980. Just because the guys before that, it was a different game. We weren't really watching. So um, I'm going to say that my criteria here for pass rushers is outside linebackers and defensive ends. We can't really separate them just because there's so much overlap depending on what type of defense they play and so on. And my criteria for what makes a great pass rusher is sacks, subsequent forced fumbles, and tackles. I think that's the three ways that they impact the game the most. So you're going to see that a lot in my list here. I'm sure Naif has his own criteria as well, as we will see. So let's go ahead and get right into it here with the number 10 guy. Now, this is a list that came together from me, Naif, and OY. OY, unfortunately, I don't know if he's going to jump in. I sent him a link. But Dallas Cowboys, the entire infrastructure, shame on you. Shame on you for what you did to OY to discourage him. He just simply said, I don't care about football anymore. That's what he said. I mean, you broke him. You broke the guy. Unless he jumps on. I don't know. Maybe he'll jump on, but it seems like you guys, you broke him. Naif, you said that the Cowboys are in a rebuilding year. They said they were all in. The name of our group chat is All Out because that's basically what they've seemed to have been. They made some, I think, good picks in the draft. But what are your just generally before we get into this list? What are your general thoughts about the Cowboys and where they're
It's
headed?
definitely a rebuild, man. I was just looking at this. We have 30 free agents to sign next year. So that includes some of the people we brought in this year on one-year deals, but 30 free agents. And at the top of the list, obviously, you have your quarterback, your wide receiver, and a guy that should have been on this list. But speaking of criteria,
Yeah.
I excluded everybody that's playing today. So I just want to throw that out there.
Any current player? You didn't
Yeah,
include any current
yeah, I
player.
didn't. There are a couple of current
Well,
players that could have made the list. We'll talk about that more
we'll
later. But
see. Yeah, we'll
yeah,
see. We'll see. I don't know.
yeah, we're
Game has
definitely
changed.
we're in for a rebuild. I don't know if it's a year rebuild. I think it's going to take a few years. We'll see.
Yeah.
It's Trey Lance season in Dallas. I think soon.
Oh boy, dude! If you guys got to rely,
Oh, he's not going to like that, but
if you guys got to rely on Trey Lance, it's going to be more like
I
a
don't want
decade
to.
rebuild.
I don't want to. But
Yeah,
that's what it's
that's
looking
tough.
like.
That's tough. All right. So we'll get started here. At number 10, we have Terrell Suggs. Now, Terrell Suggs was not on Naif's list or OY's list. He was just on my list, and he was pretty high on my list. I had him at number 5. So
Whoa.
I'm gonna read you off. You know what I do? I'm the stat guy. I'm gonna read you
All
off
right.
the stats. He had 151 and a half sacks. So he had a lot of them in the playoffs. That's six. He's sixth all time in sacks. He had 41 forced fumbles. Of course, forced fumbles are big. They can, they're turnovers. I think I value them very highly. He was 11th all time in forced fumbles.
Wow.
Um, 895 combined tackles, including 80 in the playoffs, which is amongst the highest in the position. He's first all time in tackles for loss at 202. Now that stat only came to the league in 1999. They only recorded it since 1999, but he is first all time in that stat. That's a big stat, tackles for loss. Has a little bit of longevity. He played for 16 years, and he has 2 Super Bowls. So I think that's a pretty great resume for him as a pass rusher. Any thoughts on Terrell Suggs?
Listen, man, I'm not mad at all. I think he could have made my list if I gave it a little more attention. 10, 9 seems like a good place for him, but 5, wow. I mean, some of those stats you just mentioned, though, they're pretty damning. I wish I looked into it a little bit more. Leading the league in tackles for loss and second all time in forced fumbles. That's incredible, man.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, if I was to revisit my list, I might put him there at 9, 10.
yeah. Yeah, man. No, he was a great player, game wrecker. He was on those great Ravens defenses. I just want to clarify: he's 11th all time in forced fumbles, 6th all time in sacks, number 1 in tackles for loss. So
Oh,
great resume. And those Ravens defenses were great. And he gets kind of maybe lost a little bit, behind whatever Ed Reed, Ray Lewis, some of these guys that had more shine than him, and he came a little bit after them anyway. But anyway, that's number 10. At number 9, we have Kevin Greene, both the football player and the WCW wrestler, if I'm not mistaken, right? Wasn't he a WCW wrestler?
yes, he was. He was.
Yeah, man. No, he was great. He was like one of the OG guys that athletes that went and did wrestling. Uh,
Top 3 hairs of all time.
yeah, man, that was great.
Top 3
That
hairs.
was very menacing. So he was on my and your list. He was not on OY's list. Do you have what are your thoughts on Kevin Greene? Just initial thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I had him 8th. I think if we are doing a list of greatest locks, I think this guy would be top 3. He's got some of the best
Goldilocks.
hair I've ever seen. I think Lily would approve. He's got a name that's nasty.
Oh yeah.
I just remember him as a kid, man, watching those Steelers in the 90s, early to mid 90s. And then I remember he went to the Panthers later on in his career. And the Panthers, I remember they jumped out the screen when they first started. They reached like an NFC championship game. He was on that team. Um, just a great pass rusher, man. We're talking pass rushers. All these guys got to be mean. He was mean. He
Yeah.
was definitely mean and green.
Absolutely. And stats wise, he had 168 and a half sacks. That's 4th all time. So he's
Wow.
top 5 in sacks all time. 23 forced fumbles. That keeps him in the top 50 amongst forced fumbles all time. And 744 combined tackles keeps him in the top 250. But really, this is a kind of acknowledgement that he was a great pass rusher and it resulted in sacks. And he played for 14 years. Rest in peace to him as well. I mean, I know he
Uh,
he he died. Uh, yeah, I think it was like maybe like 10 or more years ago. But yeah, rest in peace to the great mean Kevin Greene. We move now to number 9 or number 8, excuse me. And this is going to be a little bit of a controversial. J.J. Watt at number 8. So I'm going to let you talk about him because he was on your list and OY's list. He did not make my top 10 at all.
wow.
So I'll let you
Um,
talk about him.
yeah, I mean, I had him number 9 on my list. Definitely a menacing player. Again, just to preface this by saying that I left out all active players, and if I were to probably include some active players, I think his brother would take his place and he wouldn't make the top 10.
Hmm.
Now, Watt was what I think a defensive player of the year on one or two. I'm not sure. I don't have the stats in front of me.
Yeah.
But he led the league in sacks. He, for a period of time, he was the only player on that team. He was the only guy you had the game plan for on that Houston Texans team. And he got him to the playoffs uh, with, through bad quarterback play. Obviously, his career derailed pretty quick there at the end. The fall off was just a drop off. And I just think he was a great player. And if you leave out these modern players like his brother, I think he should have made your list, Omar.
Yeah. Well, listen, if this was like a greatest Texans of all time list, he would be like on there for sure. He would be top 10. Might be number one. I'm going to read you his stats and then I'm going to give you my opinion on him. So, um, damn, you got some crazy birds.
Yeah, they don't like what you just said, man. Seems like
Bunch
there's
of
some people
JJ
who are
Watt
fans.
fans squawking. Okay, so he had 120 and a half sacks. That's around 34th all time. He's like top 40. 27 forced fumbles. That's like in the 40s as well. 617 tackles. That's very low. That's not even in the top like 300. And like you said, he had a relatively short career. He only played for 11 years. And in the back end of that 11 years, he really dropped off. He was constantly injured. Really didn't have an impact at the end there, and then he just kind of retired. I know there's some talk about him wanting to play with TJ, but I don't know why he couldn't make that happen. I think that would have been great. But I'm going to say something a little bit controversial here, but I think that sports media kind of artificially inflated this guy a little bit. I think he is. Listen, I'm going to be brutally honest here. I think the NFL at times needs white athletes to be kind of uh, given the spotlight so that people can, you know, so they can market him, so that people can stay, involved in the NFL. Not only on offense, they kind of boast the quarterbacks, but who on defense are they really going to boast? So, and I understand it. It's good for business. It's a good marketing strategy. But the fact that you and OY have this guy on your list, to me it doesn't make sense because it is not merited at all. Um,
Omar,
yeah, yeah. 3-time
three-time
defensive player of the
defensive
year.
player of the year.
Yeah,
That's
listen,
more
man.
to.
But he had how many useful years?
That's
He
true.
played maybe
That's
eight
true.
useful years, eight,
That's true.
nine,
But
nine
when he was
useful
on the
years.
field, I mean, he was a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah,
Um, I'm looking at his stats now. I mean, he had 220 plus sack seasons. Two. That's
yeah,
all. That's incredible.
yeah. I know. I mean, this is kind of a thread with us. I know you guys like the guys that have really, really good primes. For me, I'm about more so about longevity and kind of where he stands with the stats. And
That's what it is.
I think he had a great brief prime, and I think he was kind of artificially inflated, like I said, media wise and maybe otherwise. I don't know, but I don't even think he's the greatest pass rusher of his generation. I think there's some other. I think I'd take Terrell Suggs over him, and there's another guy.
His brother's better than him. I mean, let's
I
not.
think his brother's on a trajectory to be
Yeah,
better, but his brother also gets injured quite often. So
yeah.
we'll have to see that as well. So, um, yeah, I mean, I think Kevin Greene is even more impressive than JJ Watt, obviously, in my opinion. So we'll move on now to the number 7 greatest
I know
pass
who this
rusher.
is. I know who this is.
What's your guess?
Demarcus Ware.
No, Michael Strahan at number 7.
Okay.
This is a guy that was on my list and your list. He wasn't on OY's list. I don't know if that's because he's a giant and that's some NFC East hate.
Probably.
But I'm going to give you the floor here. What do you have to say about Michael Strahan?
Listen, man, he's probably the nicest pass rusher of all time in terms of personality. The
Yeah, yeah.
guy, the guy seems like he's a really nice guy. Um, Speaking of inflated stats, I think Michael Strahan had some inflated stats. Again, if I was to do this list over, I don't know if I'd put him that high, but he does have
Mm.
that sack record that's yet to be broken, right?
Yep.
Although there are people that say that whoever was counting stats that year really gave him the benefit of the doubt. I mean, on some of these sacks, that's something to look into. But yeah, I mean, as in terms of a pass rusher, this guy got to the quarterback. He did it often. I'm just looking at his stats right now. He's a Super Bowl champion. He was the Defensive Player of the Year and 4-time First Team All Pro. He led the league in sacks twice. Led the league in forced fumbles once. And sacks in a season, he's tied for first with TJ Watt.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Naif, the stat guy. Look at that. Pulling out the stats.
Um,
Uh, this guy has had a great post-football career. I mean, he's like one of the most famous post, in terms of like in broadcasting and things like that. Um, Stat wise, like you said, he had 151 sacks. That's puts him in the top 10. He's 10th all time. 25 forced fumbles, again, top 50. He has that record that really kind of people continue to talk about him because of that record. But like you said, there is some controversy around it. The fact that Brett Favre kind of gave it to him a little bit, and then also there was, I think, like another play throughout the year where it was like wasn't really a sack. Like the quarterback had was like maybe a half yard ahead of the line of scrimmage or something like that. So there is some controversy around it, but he does have it. He stays in people's memories because of it. Played 14 years. He also had the most solo tackles of any pass rusher. From what I saw, he had like 663, 902 combined tackles, of which 48 came in the playoffs. I mean, he was a big part of their playoff success and won a Super Bowl. So
where'd you have him on your list?
on my list, I had him at number 7.
I think that's more appropriate.
Yeah. What did you have him?
I had him 6th.
6. Yeah, that's about right. Speaking of 6, the number 6 greatest pass rusher is
Demarcus Omar Ware.
Demarcus Ware. His middle name is Omar.
His middle name is Emma.
Really?
Yeah.
Had I known that, maybe I would have put him on my list. He's on yours, and OY's not on my list. Not top 10 greatest pass rusher.
Wow.
Listen, when I saw this, I thought, this is you and OY putting on your cowboy blue glasses. And this is a nostalgia pick. Prove otherwise.
No. So, Demarcus Omar Ware.
Great name.
4-time First Team All Pro. Super Bowl champion. 9-time Pro Bowler. Led the league in sacks. Not once, but twice. And I think what catapulted him is him leaving the Dallas Cowboys and winning that Super Bowl. This guy had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 double-digit sack seasons, including his first with Denver, where he won that Super Bowl. Actually, no, he didn't win the Super Bowl first, but he had 8 double-digit sack seasons. He had a 20 sack season, a 19 and a half sack season. If you want consistency, this guy was consistent. And he played through a ton of injuries with the Cowboys. For a while, he was the only thing we had going on defense. Yeah, he's the Cowboys' all-time leader in sacks, all-time leader in forced fumbles, all-time leader in tackles for loss, and all-time leader in quarterback hits. And this is a team that's had people like Charles Haley and Bob Lilly, a bunch of Hall of Famers. So I definitely think he deserves this spot on this list.
Listen, as you were kind of rattling off some of those stats, I saw a lot of parallels with another guy that wasn't on my list, and that's J.J. Watt. And it's similar. It's a brief, very impressive prime. He had 146 sacks. That's 13th all time, right outside the top 10. 36 forced fumbles. That's very impressive. 15th all time. 680 tackles. That's kind of low, and he only played for 11 years. That's the same number of years that J.J. Watt played. He won a Super Bowl, like you mentioned, with the Broncos, with the caveat, though, that was at the end of his career, and he was a little bit past his prime. He was on his way down a little bit. I think he still had an okay season. Maybe he had like 12 sacks, but he retired, I think, shortly after that, maybe that year or the year after or something like that. And let me tell you this. I'm going to give him his flowers in that If this was a top 15 list, he probably would have been on my top 15 list. I think he just barely missed it for me. For me, not quite top 10, didn't play enough. If he would have continued to play, then I think he could have cracked the top 10.
Or if you knew that his middle name was Omar, he
You
would
know
have
what?
definitely
That would
cracked
have
it
bumped
down.
him up a little bit for me too. Maybe I would have had to bounce Terrell Suggs just because of the name. Anyway, we're gonna move on here to the number 5 guy, which is going to be very interesting to talk about here. Number 5, the late great Derrick Thomas. Now, I'm going to step back a little bit here. He was on your list and OI's list, wasn't on my list. I'm not going to really go at it because of they're very very different circumstances for this one. So I'm going to give you the floor to start, and then I'll talk about Derrick Thomas after
I
you.
mean, Omar, you got to include this guy in your list. I don't know how you didn't. This
Mm,
guy had a 20 sack season in 1990.
yeah,
He didn't even play the full season that year.
right.
He had, I mean, this guy
Beast.
played in an era where they ran the ball to death. And this guy posted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 double-digit sack seasons. Now, look, he played for 10 years, and maybe that's why you didn't include him. But
Hmm.
for those 10 seasons that he did play, he was a performer. Obviously, he had an early death, and it's sad. But this guy was a two-team, first-team All-Pro, two-time. He led the league in sacks once, two-time. He led the league in forced fumbles, defensive rookie of the year. Incredible player. I don't see how you can leave him off your list. I think I had him high. I had him third. Yeah, I had him third. I don't
Yeah,
know where OY had him. I would
yeah,
assume he had him also third or something
yeah. Very high.
because you left
Uh,
him off the list. And he's,
it's tough for me, man, because of course, I look at the body of the career, and um, I was very close to putting him at 10 as well, just because he was on an all-time great trajectory. Could have been the greatest of all time. Obviously, the reason for him not doing that is outside of anything we could have talked about before, which is a tragic car accident, after his 10th year. So it's not retirement, it's not injuries, it's none of that. There's no quitting. It's just tragedy. So of course I understand that. And listen, 41 forced fumbles. That's ninth all time. He only played for 10 years. 133 sacks. That's 25th all time. Again, only played for 10 years. I can't really say much more than this, man. I mean, I can't criticize him. I can't say anything else. For me, it's just I just have a different criteria, and I
so
understand.
even now, as you ramble off those stats, if I gave you a mulligan, you
Yeah,
still wouldn't include him.
I who am I going to take off? It's tough, man. I mean,
Yeah,
these
they're
other
all
people
stars
had
failed,
such
bro.
great careers. I know it's tough. It's tough. I can't really say anything bad about him. He was a great player to watch. Great player to watch, and
You
gone
know,
too
this
soon.
was this was one of the hardest lists to do. This is
Yeah, it
one of
was
the
very
hardest.
difficult.
I mean, you can replace a lot of these guys. Like I was second guessing my list the minute I sent it to you. So
Yeah, you put like 5 guys in that number 10 spot.
yes, and I still
That's
want to
true.
change it now. So I mean,
Yeah,
I
it's tough.
understand. I understand.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, rest in peace, the great Derrick Thomas. All right. Number 4, greatest pass rusher of all time is Julius Peppers. And number 4, great player on multiple teams. Packer, Panther, I think Bear. He played for a bunch of teams and was just an incredible player. Um, I'll read off some of his stats and then I'll throw it to you. 166 sacks. That's fifth all time. 54 forced fumbles. That puts him at second all time. 768 combined tackles. Still keeps him in the top 250. And he played for 16 years. He had a longevity argument that a lot of these players don't have. So Julius Peppers, I couldn't put him any lower. He was fourth on my list as well. So as OY joins.
Fellas.
I want to put in that Undertaker noise for somebody coming. How you doing? How you doing? Oh, why?
I'm hanging in there, man. I'm hanging in there. I think like the dark room kind of suits my ambiance right now.
I
Um,
know we were talking at the beginning about how what the Cowboys have done and just
We're
how it's a
talking about the
tragedy.
Trey Lance era.
Yeah, yeah. We'll
we're
no,
not
okay.
getting into that.
We won't talk about the Cowboys at all. But yeah, so
We
oh
talked
why
about a Cowboy
we did talk about a former Cowboy
who
that
Omar left off his list.
I did. Well, let's recap it just real quick, and then why we can get your perspective. We're at number 4 right now, and then now if you can talk about Peppers. So the list that we had OY is 10 Terrell Suggs, 9 Kevin Greene, 8 J.J. Watt, 7 Michael Strahan, 6 Demarcus Ware, and then 5 Derrick Thomas, and then we just said number 4 Julius Peppers. Do you have any gripes with that list? Any general thoughts?
Um, I don't have too many gripes. I think it's mainly okay, but I don't think there's any way. But who? I don't think Peppers was a better pass rusher than Demarcus Ware. I don't. I think Ware was probably the best pass rusher of his era. Because we're talking just pass rushing. I think
Yeah,
you could. I think you can make a legit argument that maybe J.J. Watt was a better overall player. You can make an argument there were better overall players, but if we're talking just pass rushing, yeah, I think Ware. I had him in my top three. I think the list that I sent to you, something like that.
yeah,
So,
right.
um, I mean, I saw it firsthand. I know Knife saw it firsthand as a pass rusher. He was second to none. So that's my
Yeah.
only gripe. But I think that's a pretty decent list. I left Kevin Greene off my list because I don't know. I felt like he kind of took the Frank Gore approach to getting sacks, where he kind of just hung around long enough. But
That's why I
I think
liked him.
I think OY would have included him if he went to WWF instead of WWE.
That's right.
WCW.
If we do a list of people that both played in the NFL and pro wrestling, Kevin Green's got to be in the top 10.
And top three hairs of all time. Remember, he's up
That's
there.
true. That's
that's
true.
true.
Oh, why? One big thing we were curious about is why you left Michael Strahan off your list.
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh, dang. Okay, that was an oversight.
Okay.
If I
Okay.
left
Got
him
it.
off my list, I
Okay.
think he was definitely like. Where did you guys have him? Like 7 or 8?
7. Yeah. Yeah.
That's about
If
right.
that's an oversight, OY, what if somebody left Derrick Thomas off their list? Would that be an oversight?
Yeah, you can say that.
Guilty.
Oh,
Listen, we don't really want to rehash this. I can't really say much about Derek Thomas. Wait, listen, I'm just going to repeat what I said before. It was an unprecedented situation that happened. I know he was on an all-time great trajectory. He could have been number 1 all-time in this list. But I look at entire careers. That's the thing. And he had really he couldn't control this. Obviously, it was tragic. I don't know, just couldn't do it because I didn't know who else I could take off. That was my rationale. So,
so is it because you're giving more weight to like the longevity part of it?
yeah, that's the thing, and that's always been my criteria. If you watch some of the other top tens, by the way, after you watch this, go check out we have top tens of every position: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, everything, and go check those out after you watch this as well. But yeah, that's the reason. Yeah. So at 4 here, we have Julius Peppers. I talked about him a little bit.
Can I
NF,
get
give your
another
thoughts on Julius.
almond cafe latte?
Almond Cafe Latte. There you
Oh,
go.
sure.
That's all that needs to be said about Julius
Yeah,
Peppers.
I need some
A
coffee
food.
Nice
because
got
last
that
night
Arab money.
Exactly. Listen. What goes well with peppers, stuffed peppers, is an almond cappuccino latte or whatever the hell you said.
exactly.
There you go.
Listen, man, Peppers. Yeah, I included him on my list. I think I had him fifth. Yeah, I think I had him fifth. He was a great pass rusher. He did it for a long time. I put him on the list despite the fact that a lot of people, talk about that Des drop. I think it was the Julius Peppers fumble. Almond latte, please. I think it was the Julius Peppers strip of DeMarco Murray that really cost us that game. Uh,
Hmm.
Murray had Murray had a wide open run to the end zone, and Peppers forced the fumble. I think that was the same game, right? Away. Yeah.
Don't bring up Cowboy stuff. Come on, we just got him on here.
Sorry, but yeah, I'm saying I included him on the list despite that. This guy did it for a long time. He had multiple double-digit sack seasons, and then when you thought he fell off there towards the end with Chicago and Green Bay, he rejoins the Panthers and he has an 11 sack season where he only started 5 games. Um, Definitely one of the greatest pure pass rushers to ever play the game. He did it for a long time. Three-time first team All Pro, 9-time Pro Bowler, Defensive
Mhm.
Rookie of the Year. He's up there. Maybe he shouldn't be as high as I had him on the list at fifth, but I think he should crack everybody's top 10.
Yeah. Oh, why? Thoughts on Julius Peppers?
Yeah, I think what's funny about Julius Peppers is he kind of reminds me of he's like the DN version of Charles Woodson, where he was really good player, great elite player. Then he goes to another team and kind of has like a second act where he's also great.
Mm.
And to be honest, I think for Peppers, his second act, like whatever, when he went to Green Bay, was actually what elevated him. Like I always thought he was a great player, but I think when I saw what he did with the Packers, I was like, oh yeah, this guy's bona fide Hall of Famer, one of the best pass rushers, one of the best players of his era. I think that kind of like solidified him because I saw him. It's not just that he did it twice; it's that he really did kind of have a resurgence of his career, and he did it for a long time. So I think that's what really stood out to me about him.
That's a great parallel. They had the resurgence in the same place, both in Green Bay. So I guess if for second acts, you just go to Green Bay. That gives a lot of hope to Josh Jacobs. He's also going to Green Bay for a possible second act. We'll see. I don't know if it's going to happen. But that's our number 4 greatest pass rusher. On to number 3. Number 3 greatest pass rusher is the original LT, Lawrence Taylor, the great one, the one revered by Bill Belichick. The only way to get him to say more than a few words is to ask him about Lawrence Taylor. You guys saw him in your division for quite a while. OY, we'll start with you. Thoughts on the original LT?
Yeah, I think this is about right. And before your audience loses its mind, we're talking about pass rushing. Like I texted you this, like as a player, like yeah, he's number one, but
Mm-hmm.
as a pass rusher, I think there's only like two guys I put above him, and so I have an idea who those two guys are. But yeah, he LT changed the game as we all know, right? He made these 3-4 outside backers slash edge rushers. He made it a thing, and I think he speaks for himself. We already talked about him in one of your previous top tens, so I don't have
Yep.
much to say. I'll just say that the only reason he's number three is because we're talking about just pure pass rushing. But otherwise, he'd be number one.
Yeah, solid points. NF, the great giant.
Listen, man, I can understand somebody making an argument for LT being the number one pass rusher of all time. I had him number 3, so obviously I looked at those other guys as more pure pass rushers. But just like I said, this guy's got to be the greatest defensive player of all time. I think in his first season they weren't even counting sacks, and he had like 9.5. I'm sure he had a lot more than that.
Yeah.
He won a defensive MVP, won 2 Super Bowls, multiple double-digit sack seasons, and he did this all while on cocaine, which is incredible. Um, Now, some might say that's a performance enhancer. Who knows?
Mm.
Um, he also had a great prime and then a fall off, steep fall off there towards the end.
Yeah.
But one of the greatest players of all time. Yeah, two-time Super Bowl winner, MVP, multiple double-digit sack seasons. I think he had a few more that weren't counted. The way they counted sacks back then is a lot different. So, yeah, man, LT's the greatest defensive player.
Yeah. Well, listen, there are a few times where the stats are so impressive and so lofty relative to everybody else, no matter how long they played, that it doesn't matter how long they played. And he broke the mold. He only played for 11 years, but still a longevity guy. Could not put him any lower than 3 on this list. So that'll tell you everything you need to know here. I'll read off his stats: 148 and a half sacks. That's ninth all time. And he only played for 11 years. Um, he
Is that
had
counting his
so
first year?
that's so yes, that's the best record I could get of his
Okay.
in terms of when they were recording it. The next one is a little tougher, the one about forced fumbles, because they only started recording that as a stat in 1993, and of course, he played mostly in the 80s. So that stat is either 33 or 56, depending on how you're recording it. So that could have been like top 5 all time or like top 30, depending on who's recording it. But he was a beast either way. He had 1,089 combined tackles. Again, that's top 3, top 5 all time at the position. He has the aura of the most skilled, pass rusher, like OY mentioned. Famous still for many reasons. It's still relevant, like I said, for the way Bill Belichick talks about him, and he's still in the news now. Everyone knows why. And that big Joe Theismann play, unfortunate, but also it's just like there's so many things to like keep in front of mind. He has 2 Super Bowls. Um,
He never led the league in sacks.
that's crazy. That's one of
I'm,
NF's big criteria.
I think if I remember, I could be wrong, but I think he never led the league in sacks. So
Yeah.
the thing with him is like he was always up there. I think in terms of like being among the league leaders. But
Mhm.
what the big thing with LT, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like the
Sure.
big thing with him is like his impact on like the impact that he made on the games to completely wreck the games.
Hmm.
It's Bill Parcells had this thing he used to call these guys catalytic players, where they just destroy the game. Because you can have guys who rack up stats, but you get these guys who just completely wreck the games. The stats don't matter at that point.
He led the league in sacks once, 1986. We had 20 now, but still, I mean,
Yeah. Tremendous
he
player. You're
had
right.
multiple.
That kind of force you have on the game is you can't really calculate it. So, great player. LT at number 3. Moving to number 2 of the greatest pass rushers, we have
Bruce Smith.
Reggie White at number 2. Great player for the Eagles and the Packers. And NF, we'll go to you first here. Reggie White, what do you got on him?
I had him number 2. Incredible player. Did it for a long time, about 15 seasons in the NFL. I'm going to read off some stats. He was 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, a decade apart. So he won it in
Wow.
'87, and then he won it in 1998, which is incredible if you think about
Yeah.
that. Great guy. He was an 8-time first-team All-Pro. Nice guy, reminiscent of Michael Strahan. Incredible stats now that I'm reading. It's insane. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 double-digit sack seasons. And then
Man.
again, just like Julius Peppers, right when you think he was falling off, he had a 16 sack season in 1998. And then I guess he retired and came back and played for another season with the Panthers. Incredible pass rusher. If you're talking just pure defensive ends, I think he's got to be right up there on the list, number 1 and number 2.
He's one of the
I
guys that
have
you
him number
think
2.
about.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When you think of pass rushers. Oh, why? Thoughts on Reggie White?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised actually. I thought this would have been a clear cut number 1, to be honest with you. I think
Hmm.
I think a lot of people would put Reggie White as the greatest defensive end to ever play. And some people would say he's the greatest defensive player. Now, I don't agree with that. I think, it's the guy LT, but regardless, I think for purposes of this exercise, I do think he's the best pass rusher. Um, he could do, he was mainly, from what I remember, a power rusher. But, I think he had enough speed. And I think, um, he retired as the NFL's all-time sack leader. He was a huge. It's kind of funny. People forget. I think most people would say Dion, Peyton Manning, probably the greatest. Maybe Tom Brady, probably the biggest free agent signings. But Reggie White going to the Packers was huge. Like when he went to the Packers, I think he elevated them into like that top of the conference team, like among the top teams. So to me, Reggie White is the best pass rusher I've seen. So I had him at 1. So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Worth mentioning, another WCW wrestler.
There you go.
It's 2 in a row now. Yeah, him and LT both wrestled.
Him and Kevin Greene as well.
And Kevin Greene as well.
But that's interesting.
Yeah, he
also another guy.
Bam Bam Bigelow.
Oh, I remember Bam Bam for sure. But another guy that was gone too soon as well, passed away early. I'll read off the stats here. He had north of 200 sacks. There's only 2 guys that have ever done that, 210 sacks. Many came in the playoffs. He was huge in the playoffs. 33 forced fumbles. That's 20th all-time. 1,129 combined tackles. That's third most all-time at this position and 55th overall. And this is, of course, combined tackles is a stat where it's mostly linebackers, safeties, things like that. Played 15 years, won a Super Bowl, had a huge impact. I agree with OY. Depending on your list, could have been number 1. However, the number 1 pass rusher of all time.
If I may,
Jump in.
This has got to be a typo or something. This guy had 21 sacks in 1987, playing only 12 games.
Really?
Yeah, he would have definitely shattered the record if that's the case. If he plays 4 more games.
Yeah.
That's insane.
That's a crazy stat. Wow. Well, listen, he's definitely worthy of number 1 on this list. I think he's a peer to the guy who will be number 1, which is
Charles Trapper.
Who the heck is Charles Trapper?
It's Randy Gregory, man. It's Randy Gregory. We all know
Charles Trapper? Is that the guy they named the Trapper Keeper after?
He's the guy that.
Don't worry about
it. Of course, it's the one and only Bruce Smith of Buffalo Bills fame. I'll read off his stats here, and then I'll hand it to you guys. 214 and a half sacks. Many came in the playoffs. He's first all-time in sacks. 46 forced fumbles. That's 5th all-time. But he likely had a lot more than that because the stat was only recorded starting in 1993. So he could be number 1 all-time. But either way, he's top 5, top 2 all-time in sacks and forced fumbles. He has the most combined tackles of anyone at this position. 1,238, even though they started recording the stat 2 years after he started playing. So he likely has even more than that. He had more longevity than anybody else at this position. He played for 18 years. And while he didn't win a Super Bowl, he led them to 4 straight. NF, talk about Bruce Smith.
Listen, man, if I was to do this list again, I think I would have Reggie White above.
Because of that one stat? Because of that one stat that you mentioned.
Now that I'm looking into the stats, that's an incredible stat. Bruce Smith is definitely up there. He would be number 2. I had him number 1. Longevity was the key for me initially. This guy was a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, won it 6 years apart, which is incredible. Led the league in forced fumbles twice, 11-time Pro Bowler, 9-time first-team All-Pro. In terms of longevity, this guy was it as a defensive end. A great player, had a 19-sack season, and he went and played for the Redskins there towards the end. Yes, I said Redskins. Had a double-digit sack season for them as well. I think this guy might go down as number 1 if he wins one of those Super Bowls. But yeah, he got there 4 times. Couldn't win.
Yeah,
great pass rusher. If I were to do this again, he'd be number 2. But he definitely deserves to be up there.
Oh, why? Tell us why he was number 2 on your list.
The only reason he's number 2 is that Reggie White's better. That's it. I think, like you said, these guys are kind of peers. I think Reggie White probably had a bigger impact on games I mean, I'm not trying to take away from Bruce Smith, but I'm comparing, these. I'm basically trying to, what's that saying? I'm basically trying to parse
Split
through
hairs.
like these really thin kind of
Splitting
whatever.
hairs. Splitting hairs.
Yeah, splitting hairs. There you go, splitting hairs. I'm
There
trying to
you go.
split hairs here. I think with Bruce Smith, the argument's going to be longevity, right?
Yeah.
He played for a long time, and now he wasn't the player that he was towards the end of his career, but I think the fact that he was still able to kind of grind it out and still be relevant is kind of a testament to the type of player that he was. So you can't take that away from him. I don't have any gripes about these guys being the top two. I would just kind of switch them, but hey, it's understandable.
Absolutely. So those were the top 10 greatest pass rushers. And I think that completes pretty much all of our top 10, unless we want to do offensive linemen or interior defensive linemen. We'll talk
Where
about
did you
that.
have him, Omar?
Who, Bruce Smith?
You. Yeah.
Number one. I had number one. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he meets all the criteria for me.
Man, there's some honorable mentions we should probably rattle off here.
That's what I was going to get to next. So, NF, we'll start with you. Honorable mentions. Go for it.
Off the top of my head, Jason Taylor, great defensive
Hmm.
end.
Yeah,
Who else did I have? Dwight Freeney, Jared
that was,
Allen,
I think, both of y'all's list. Yeah.
John Randall. He
Mm.
made my final top 10 list at 10.
He was on my list too. Yeah.
He was up there. He was probably 10th. That's probably why he didn't make it.
He was 11th on our combined list.
Okay. There's another guy I'm thinking of, Robert Mathis, underrated
Mm.
defensive end.
Robert Mathis, first all time in forced fumbles. Nobody has more forced fumbles than him. Great player.
Yeah, I think he just played during a time where there was a better defensive end on that team, and that's why maybe he didn't. Did anybody have Freeney on their list?
I think I did. Might have.
Let me see. Dwight Freeney. OY had him at number, I think, 8 or nine,
I
8 or
can see
9.
that. I can
9.
see that argument. I can see that argument being made.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you guys?
OY.
Well, I caught a lot of flack for putting Ricky Jackson on there. But
I
I
can
thought
see
that was
that.
I thought that was great,
I
but
can see
brother
that.
doesn't
I
know
can
who
see
he
that.
is, so that's only why. I thought he was top 20 for me.
Well, he thinks he's part of the Jackson 5. Why are we mentioning singers here?
I'm
Good.
trying to think. I think Charles Haley's probably an honorable mention. I think he's probably closer to like top 20, but I think he should deserve a mention. Um, I think I had JJ Watt on there too. I don't think Watt's as good of a pass rusher as these guys. I think he is more of a game wrecker, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think JJ definitely deserves to be on there. I know you were talking about TJ. I think it's a little too soon for TJ right now, but
I think OY, by the way, I said I left off all current players on purpose.
left off all what?
Current players. So I think
Oh,
TJ's
current
going to
players.
be better than JJ, but I had JJ on the list.
I think there's
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there's like three players right now who could maybe make the list one day.
Micah.
May-
Come on.
But
Are you talking top 10 greatest pass rushers or top 10 greatest
One day.
podcasters?
One day.
but you know
One
what?
day.
You know
Can't
what?
project it.
Honestly, I think Micah also falls in the category of like a better player than a pass rusher. Like he can rush the passer, but I think like some of these other guys like Miles Garrett, Nick Bosa, I think they have better tech, like pure pass rushing technique. I think like as a pass rusher, they're probably better, but I don't think they're better players, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think those guys are more well suited, especially because they line up as a pure pass rusher. Micah kind of moves around a little bit. Um, my honorable mention, guys. Well, I'll tell you three guys that were on my top 10 list didn't even make it. Jason Taylor, I had at number 10. You mentioned him. His only thing is he never had playoff success. That guy really didn't come up clutch when it came time to. I had Richard Dent. You guys know Richard Dent, linebacker for the Bears and then later the
Yeah.
Niners. 85 Bears, great player. And then somebody nobody mentioned, and I had number 6. Any guesses?
Chris Doleman.
Chris Doleman. He got it on the first try. Chris Doleman. Great Viking. Ruddy, where the hell are you, buddy? Because I was ready to drop a
He's
Chris
not even
Doleman.
better than John Randall.
Bro. 157 and a half sacks, 7th all-time in sacks, 44 forced fumbles, 6th all-time, 990, almost 1,000 combined tackles, 4th at this position, played for 14 years, bro. He is like top at 100 like every single defensive stat, and then also top 10 in the 2 most important ones. So I know that's an oversight. I know like basically only really big, football people, no casuals really know about Chris Doleman. So I can understand.
I think he's just overshadowed by John Randall is what it is. But
Right.
if you watch football, then you know he was a beast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I thought you'd
I'm gonna
mention
go.
Randall since he played for your Seahawks too. Had a couple nice seasons there.
Who?
Yeah, well,
John Randall.
John Randall,
All right.
he's mostly forgettable in his time there. But there's a bunch of other guys. I'm just gonna rattle off names. James Harrison, Von Miller, one of the current players that really could have gotten on this list. Willie McGinnis is number 1 in playoff sacks. He was really good playoff performer, 75 combined tackles in the playoffs. Some older guys, Deacon Jones, Jack Youngblood, Alan Page. You guys mentioned John Randall, Robert Mathis, Don Abraham. You guys mentioned Dwight Freeney. I had Ricky Jackson, OCU Minura, Jared Allen, Khalil Mack, Chandler Jones, Cliff Averill, Robert Quinn, Tom Bahali. And of the current guys, you guys, mentioned TJ Watt, and then Calais Campbell is also has some pretty impressive stuff, but he's about ready to be done. But yeah, like you guys mentioned, of all the guys that are currently playing, TJ Watt is the only real guy that I think that has a shot at cracking this list if he stays healthy. So he has almost 100 sacks. He has 96 and a half sacks. So very impressive.
Randy White. Randy White could have made this list.
Really?
Who's Randy White?
Yeah. I'm looking at his stats now.
Really?
I don't know, man. He doesn't strike me as a pass
they weren't
rusher.
counting stats. They weren't counting stats the first.
But we weren't going back that far. If we went back that far,
Yeah.
I'd probably put Deacon Jones at 1. If we
Yeah.
were going back that far.
Young blood, these guys. Yeah.
Yeah, Jack Youngblood. Yeah.
Yeah. Any final thoughts, fellas, before we wrap up?
What's next? We covered it all.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you ask. I don't know if anyone's interested in offensive linemen. I don't know if I could put together stats for that. And then there's interior defensive linemen. That's probably the most likely one to go to next. I'm also thinking about maybe doing some trivia during the off season because I don't know what else we would do football related. So those are my thoughts on
We could do a top 10 hairs list.
top 10 players. We'd have some good crossover, I think, with other demographics if we did that. Yeah. But anyway, fellas, it's been a lot of fun. The reason why we were gone for so long, I didn't have a laptop, but we're back now. I'm ready to record podcasts again. People have been listening, by the way, to our older podcasts and on Spotify and stuff like that. So thank you to the everyone that's continued to listen over this time where we've been gone since the Super Bowl recap, essentially. So thank you guys. We're gonna have
Since we got our asses handed to us.
all of us too, man. My Hawks got got their asses handed to them too, and
Oh, you guys chose the Niners?
huh?
You guys chose the Niners?
Chose? What do you mean?
Oh, you mean in the playoffs? Okay. No,
I think OY's talking about the Packers Cowboys game. Yeah, obviously. But we'll,
shout out to the sponsors, man.
Yeah, shout out. Yeah. Save some money, fellas. Like I said again, SeatGeek. You want $20 off? Use the code FootballVFootball, and you want great premium hats and T-shirts. Hyuga House. You get 15% off. I'm going to include those in the description as well. So a lot of great stuff there. But until our next podcast, it's been great catching up with you guys. NF, OY, and Bags. We'll see y'all next time.